I might have to change the setting on the audio. So we will see here. Just let me know if.
Just waiting on the video to pop up on my phone.
Okay, no worries.
2023, September 15th through the 17th at Douglas Park, Chicago.
I'll be honest, the first 2 months were tough. When I left the military, I was excited for a fresh start, but the government has been started on
Okay, Pam Morris Walton, could you talk for me, please?
Good morning. Good morning. This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it.
Wonderful. Can you hear her?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Okay, fantastic.
On both ends, yes.
Because I had to go to yet another. It's happening all the time. Okay, all right. So we're good. Okay, good. So let me do this. Excuse me, Mrs. Walton.
Yes.
Just doing this.
I am here.
And when you get back, I definitely want to get together with you.
Okay. I'm here in August.
Okay.
I'm here.
And even though I'm going to be in and out, I need to see you.
Okay.
Because I want to start something, and I need your help in beginning. I know you're involved in a lot, so you can be as involved.
1 minute, everybody.
As you want to be, as you know, or as you can be, as you know what I mean. There's no obligation. I just need to have your direction.
Okay. Count me in.
Oh, thank you. Because I think we've got to do something with women. And I keep hearing that people want to do that. And so I want to be obedient to that.
And you're the one.
Well, you're the one. I'm really following your lead. And I know, but you're involved in so many things, you know. And no, I mean, it's just the truth.
10 seconds, everyone.
I mean, it's the truth.
Okay.
And so I wouldn't, I'm not trying to pull you from because everybody, when you think church, you think Pam Morris Walton here.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Monday, July 24th, 2023. Getting a little bit of feedback, but we're working on that. It's a joy to be with you on the Santita Jackson Show as we talk about the latest on Ukraine. Hey, it opens up the news every time you turn it on. So let's find out what's going on with the cluster bombs and on and on and on. And did you know that elections have been suspended there? So when will elections resume? Because, we say that we want a democracy and all of that. So let's find out about that. But then let's find out about democracy here, a little closer to home. Tennessee has just made it even more difficult for people who have served their time, who have paid their debt to society, to become voters again. There are 48 states that do not allow felons to become registered to vote. And so we need to talk about that. That's 4.6 million Americans. That's 2% of the population, of the voting population. That's a lot of people. A lot of people who've been pushed out. As you remember, in Florida, the majority of Floridians said, hey, let them vote again once they have paid their debt to society. And then the Republican legislature overturned that. And Republicans tend not to win elections by the majority of the population. They win by the Electoral College or by some kind of machination. It's not that they don't have majority rule. So what's going on? Let's talk about that. Because if it can happen in Tennessee, if it can happen in any state, it can happen in your state, it can happen here. So let's talk about that. And then, of course, infection prevention. What does Dr. Shanina Knighton say? Prevention is better than the cure. any day. So let's get right to it, everybody. Monday, July 24th, 2023. I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. And just go on over there. Go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel and Santita Jackson and Friends if you want to be my friend on Facebook. Please, please, please go to WCPT820.com and AM950radio.com to stream us live. I am coming to you live from the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, WCPT, based here in Chicago, and AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. We got a lot to talk about today, so let's get to these headlines. Texas Governor Greg Abbott faces a deadline to commit to the removal of floating barriers at the U.S.-Mexico border or face legal action from the U.S. Justice Department. Internal discussions about taking action against Texas date back to last year when Governor Abbott began busing migrants to cities nationwide without alerting those city officials. And they have continued following the deployment of buoys in the Rio Grande, which pose a potential drowning risk to migrants. And of course, we do know that they have been ordered not to give these persons in the sweltering heat any water. There is a 19-year-old young woman, a girl who miscarried, getting caught in the wire. It's just horrific, horrific indeed. 60 Democratic lawmakers sent a letter to President Biden on Friday urging him to investigate Abbott's, quote, dangerous and cruel actions, and it is dangerous, and these actions are cruel. 7 Republican presidential candidates have met the polling requirements to appear on the August 23rd debate stage following new polling from Fox Business in Iowa and South Carolina. Former President Donald Trump, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former Vice President Mike Pence, former South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, and former New Jersey Governor Christie. That ought to be exciting. They have reached 1% or higher in at least 2 qualifying national polls and 2 qualifying state polls from separate states, which is a requirement set forth by the Republican National Committee. That is to take place, that debate, August 23rd. And we'll be talking about Ukraine as President Zelensky has vowed to retaliate against Moscow after Russian missiles badly damaged a historic cathedral in the port city of Odessa. More than 35 million people in the United States are under heat alerts, with high temperatures expected to linger over the nation for at least another week. The massive swath of extreme heat is not only taking a toll on millions of Americans, it's also driving up the cost for businesses and putting pressure on the economy, according to this CNN report. Everybody, we're going to have a high of 82 degrees. It'll be clear in Chicago today. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 89 degrees will be the high, partly cloudy. Major League Baseball, the Twins 5, the White Sox 4, the Cubs 7, the Cardinals 2, plus the World Cup. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. The United States won their first game. But what is going to happen on Wednesday? They will be playing the Netherlands. But today we'll be seeing Brazil face off against Panama. Colombia face off against South Korea, Germany versus Morocco. This is truly a World Series. And yesterday, Sweden 2, South Africa 1, the Netherlands 1, Portugal was shut out, and France and Jamaica were locked at 0-0. And in the WNBA, the Sky 90, the Storm 75, the women are just doing it, everybody. The Aces 98, the Lynx 81, and those are some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Always such a joy to have this woman with us every Monday or every other Monday, whenever she can fit us in, because she has prayer service as well. And so when she is not doing her prayer service, guess what? She's also with us, and I'm so honored to have this icon of radio with us, Pam Morris Walton, our gospel sister, sending you so much love today. How are you?
Wow. I'm doing so well. Thank you so much. I was on his wake-up list this morning along with you.
Amen.
It feels
Amen.
good.
Amen. Now
I'm happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. Now, how could we get this inspirational book, 57 days? 57 days.
The Wait for a New Heart. The Wait for a New Heart sparks a spiritual journey of love, faith, and love on Amazon. First of all, go to Amazon and get it. It's an ebook. It's iTunes. You can also go to Barnes & Noble and order it, or you can go to PamMorrisSpeaks.com website and get your autographed copy. PamMorrisSpeaks.com.
Did you have to wait 57
That's it.
days?
27.
27. Okay.
27 days. Yeah. Yeah, but what happened was I wasn't able to leave the hospital as maybe others are once they get a heart and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
It had to match. It had to match the rhythm, the blood, everything. It had to match the strange object that was in my body.
Mm.
And I had to wait for the biopsy to read 0 for me to leave.
Okay.
And it did on the 57th day. The results were 0.
And then you were able to leave.
The morning.
Okay.
And I was able to come home. Yeah. I was able to come home. It felt good.
We're gonna have to talk about that.
I
I
was
want to
so
know.
happy to come home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that's a big deal. You know, the preparations that you have to make. But I have
Yeah.
to tell you, your husband is just an absolute gem because no one takes care of this woman like he does. But the first thing I will say this: the first person who takes care of you is you.
Mhm.
Well, it's God, then you,
Yeah.
and then you found
Yeah.
a match.
Yeah.
How about that? Someone who
Yeah.
loves you
Yeah.
like God does and like you do. And that's the key. Don't
Yes.
don't try to look for someone to
Yes.
outlove you, loving you. That does not
There
work.
you go. There you
Ladies,
go.
in
There
particular.
you go. And the false alarm, I wrote about one of them. It's in the book.
Okay. I
Yeah,
cannot
it
wait
was
to
not. It was 5 days after. Yeah, 5 days after being in the hospital and getting the new pulse. Well, yeah, we'll talk about that another time.
No. We're gonna talk about
I
it.
made it out all right.
We're gonna talk about it because I just absolutely just love it. But give us the good news. We need that today. Oh, we need it.
Here it is. I'm ready. Okay. Thank you, Santita, and good morning, everybody. Stay in the light. 4 words. Stay in the light. My personal affirmation is I have a choice of light or darkness. I'm going to say it again. I have a choice of light or darkness. When you are in between jobs, without transportation, maybe without love or without money, affirm that it is only temporary. Confirm it is only temporary. This attitude shifts your thinking of hope, optimism, positive outcomes, and action. The light helps you to see possibilities when you couldn't see possibilities in the darkness. When you walk into a dark room, you need to turn the light on. Then you can see. When you walk into a dark room, turn the light on. You can see then. If you cannot see the possibilities, the option, and a way out, you need to find the light switch and turn it on. Turn your faith on. Connect with God's power. Connect with God's power. Try the positive habit of telling others to stay in the light when you see them struggling or with a problem. Be encouraging. Your encouragement is helpful to someone that's lost in darkness. It can help them find their own light switch. My choice of light, not darkness. So stay in the light. Have a good morning and a good day and a good week. Santita and everybody else.
Stay in the light.
The light. Stay in the light.
In the light. I love it. Pam Morris Walton, everybody. How can we get your book once again?
PamMorrisSpeaks.com or Amazon. Those are 2 quick ways.
Everybody get that book, and we're going to have her come on and I keep promising we're going to do that. And because we also need to have a broader discussion. Maybe I'll reach out to Dr. Damon Arnold and to Dr. Shanita Knighton about transplants. About
that would be good.
If you have someone, just what do you have to do to prepare at home? I would think that you would be hypersensitive to infection. There's just a lot of things that we need to talk about.
Yeah, I saw him at the convention. I saw him at the clergy luncheon.
Isn't he a jewel?
Dr. to Damon Arnold. He is. He really is. He's always ready
Oh,
to help somebody.
absolutely. So, I mean,
Take care.
God, I love you. Stay in the light. Joyce Anderson
love
says,
you.
possibilities. Stay in the light, everybody. Stay in the
Stay in the
light.
light, everybody.
Everybody's got a lot of. I said, Tasha, girl, you've got a lot to say about denying these people, former felons, access to the vote, but it's real. And it's a reality for 4.6 million Americans. And we've got to talk about that today. I'm going to come to you, Michael, in a hot second. But let me go to Dr. Shanina Knight, and happy birthday belatedly, my Cancerian sister.
Oh, thank you so much. How are you today?
I am doing great. Thank you so much.
That's so awesome.
Absolutely. Hope you had a marvelous birthday.
I did. It started with doing absolutely nothing, and that is just amazing.
Well, first, honey, you woke up, and then you were able to just say, "Let me relax." Praise the Lord.
Ain't that something?
Yes.
Such a blessing.
Yes.
It is.
Yes.
And it's interesting because with that rest, I think like even too, that just segues into something that we've been talking about, but I just don't think, we discuss enough. And that's the relationship between sleep and infection.
Mm.
And so, and when I say sleep and infections, we can talk about rest and infections. And it's just talking about the body's ability to be able to just absolutely do nothing. And the fact that many don't recognize, but when you have a lack of sleep, when you have a lack of rest, what happens is people will, I don't know, and I've done this, but we've worked very, very hard, right? And we might have been meeting a deadline. We might have been getting a project in. We might have been doing something, and it may have required us to get less sleep than normal. Or we might have been thinking about something too much and have gotten less rest than normal. Unfortunately, what occurs is our body does not have time to be able to recover. It doesn't have time to be able to replenish, and it doesn't have time to be able to rest. And so when we think about not only just infections, sleep, a lack of sleep is linked to so many different chronic diseases, including like heart disease, blood pressure, diabetes, and stroke. But as it relates specifically to, not sleep, absolutely. Absolutely. Your body's not having a chance to rest and do what it needs to do. It's always in a high stress state and not being able to just relax. And so just think about our resting heart rate. That's why it's called a resting heart rate, because it needs to rest. Mm-hmm. But if you're up and you're moving and you're getting around all the time, it's not getting a chance to do what it needs to do. And think about, like, for example, even when you're not asleep, how you might make more mistakes. You might experience brain fog. Things are not as clear as they normally would be. Well, it's the same thing when it comes to infection. Your body has come in contact with a plethora of germs throughout the day. And when I say germs, we can talk about germs, let's say, out in the environment. We can talk about germs because these things have occurred as a result of something that you ate. We can talk about other factors such as sugar, lowering the immune system. We can talk about, the fact that the overaccumulation of sugar is going to lower your immune system. So you're looking at all of these things that are working together, and then you couple it up with the fact that your body does not get time to rest, replenish, and be able to fight off some of the things that you may do to harm your body on a daily basis. So then when it finally does make that crash as a result of stress, then yes, you unfortunately are more prone and more at risk for infection, which is why it's one of those things that is the most important thing that you can do. So whether we're talking about fighting COVID, fighting the flu during flu season, a common cold, or just having an illness, is being able to balance your body out, meaning if you know that you are sleep deprived, possibly consuming alcohol, sugars, and different things that are going to further harm your body, it's not going to put your body back in homeostasis. So if you know that you're getting one thing or another, you have to figure out a way to balance that out by eliminating one bad in order for that bad to balance with the lack of sleep or the stress or the heavy eating of, let's say, sugary foods. And so it's very important that we think about these factors, because when we say, oh, I don't know why I got sick, or I must have picked that cold up from somewhere, a lot of times people don't recognize that it's their body telling them to essentially get some rest.
What can we do? I mean, there's no substitute for it, is there?
For sleep?
Yeah. I mean, it's like, when you're in pain, you can take a pill and maybe mitigate the pain. You can do all kinds of things, but for sleep and rest, all you can do is the thing. You got to rest.
That's it. That's actually the one thing. Somebody might say, I can cheat on the diet, I can cheat this. You cannot cheat sleep. So sleep is the one thing that's going to always catch up with you one way or another. And believe it or not, 7-hour sleepers are 300% less likely than 5-hour sleepers to develop a viral infection. So that just goes to show how important sleep is.
Well, I have had those issues. And so I hear you. It's something that I'm really trying to work on. And you know what? I'm starting to take naps throughout the day. And sometimes they're forced. My body will shut down. I'll just fall asleep. It's just tired. And because I've been getting by on about 3 hours of sleep, and that's not what you're supposed to do. I mean, and it's just remarkable that my health has been so robust, throughout all of this. And so I'm grateful. But sending you so much love, birthday lady. That's right. We're both Cancerians. That's kind of why we click. Oh, I love you, Dr. Shanina Knight. Hey, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina, the latest on Ukraine. And we're going to be talking to you, Michael. You want to talk about ranked choice voting? I'm here for it. Want to hear what your thoughts are? 4.6 million Americans who have been convicted of felonies, who've paid their debt to society. Well, in 48 states, they're not allowed to go back and vote. Now, in Florida, that was overturned, and then the Republican legislature overturned it. And now Tennessee's Republican-led legislature is making it virtually impossible for someone who has been convicted of a felony, who has served their time, to be reinstated as a voter, even if a court in another state has said your rights can be restored. Tennessee is blocking you. What is the pushback against the vote? You need to think about that, everybody. We are now in the election 2024 cycle, and everybody needs to get involved. Everybody needs to be voting. Everybody needs to be voting. But a lot of us won't be able to. Back with more on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me at 773-763-9278. Back with more in just a few minutes. Hey. It's great hearing your voice today. Oh, yeah.
Likewise. Absolutely likewise. So, no, I was going to say it's actually crazy, because one of the things that I'm hoping that we can touch on tomorrow is going to be sepsis.
It's going to be sepsis?
I really want to talk about.
Okay.
Yes, sepsis.
Okay.
I think that is important. Unfortunately, what it is that we're running into is the prevalence of it. And I'm going to tie it back to hygiene poverty, which I continue to talk about. But it's the fact that a lot of individuals that are living in poverty are exposed to all of these factors that can increase their risk for infection. But what will happen is they will end up in a condition such as sepsis, okay? Sepsis is very deadly, and unfortunately, it does disproportionately affect Blacks, and Black people are less likely to receive ICU care, which means that the fatality rate, when we're talking about someone's body becoming septic, which means that their organs are now being infected.
Sending Dr. Gibbs and Bryce Green through.
And so I think that that's something to discuss, when we talk about early warning signs. What do you do when something feels off? Because a lot of times it can be an unresolved fever. People are looking for, let's say, a scratch or a sore, And it may not necessarily be that outward appearance, but it's something that is very deadly, that if it's not treated right away, then people die.
Well, I need you to explain just very quickly before I bring on my other guest, what is sepsis?
Ooh. So let me try to unpack this.
Okay, I've got about a minute, if you can. Well, how does it
So
manifest? How do we know that we might have it?
So long story short, the best way to say it is it's a bloodstream infection that damages your organ systems. That when your organ systems are damaged as a result of these infections that have become a part of your bloodstream, they then can cause your organs to fail. And when your organs fail, that results in death. Mm-hmm. And so it's more than 200,000 cases per year that are diagnosed. Is that help? Like, I don't know if I did a good job.
No. That helps. Because when you hear that, when you're in the hospital and you hear that someone has sepsis, you get very nervous. You say, "Oh my goodness, this is not good." And the doctor will tell you, "You're right, it is not good." Because someone could die here.
And that's exactly it. And so because people don't know to recognize the symptoms, like it's crazy, Santita. Somebody can have a urinary tract infection, right? Mm-hmm. Which is something that's common. If that urinary tract infection goes untreated and that bacteria in that urinary tract infection gets into the bloodstream.
60 seconds, everybody.
That person can then become septic and die. So that's like an example of when you say, how does someone get it? It's literally letting something go untreated for an extended period of time and putting your body at risk.
Okay, here we go. Thank you for that. It's like every day I've got to look up something. It's just I got to figure it out every day. Every day.
I get it.
Every day. Well, no, hold up. I've got to switch over, but it's tomorrow. You got it. We'll be talking about sepsis.
Okay,
we need to look out for.
Good.
10 seconds.
Sending you much love, Dr. Gibbs.
Good morning, Santita.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bryce. You'll be one soon.
We can change the world.
One day.
Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. We're going to be talking about the vote today. We are in the heart of the 2024 election, everybody. It is here. It is here. We're going to have the Republican debates on August 23rd. Will the Democrats have one? We hope so, because you've got two candidates who are not doing too poorly in the polls, RFK Jr. and Marianne Williams, and you've got Cornel West. Don't you want to hear from them in addition to President Biden? I certainly do. So everybody, let's figure out how we can all get registered to vote. 4.6 million people, Americans, are banned from voting because they have had past felony convictions, even though they have served their debt to society. And of course, it's in the Constitution. You won't be a slave but for losing your freedom and then losing your right to vote. You see the connection? We'll talk about that at the top of the hour. But right now, let's talk about Ukraine. Why are we talking about Ukraine? Well, because Ukraine is coming off of your table. It is your money that is paying for this war, and they're at the top of the news. They make the news before the heat crisis makes it here in the United States. Up to 1 out of 3 Americans last week were living under just unbelievable conditions, 100 degrees or more. That's right. It was 1 in 3, roughly 1 in 3 Americans. But that was secondary to the Ukraine story. Why is Ukraine such a huge story? Who's involved in it? And what is the latest? What is the latest? Indeed, we've got Dr. David Gibbs, brilliant historian out of the University of Arizona. We've got Bryce Green from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. You had an exciting week last week, Bryce Green.
Yes, I did. Last week, I was testifying at the United Nations Security Council about the Nord Stream pipeline attack, which is an important part of this whole Ukraine war story.
Now, why were you called to testify? What's going on? We know Seymour Hersh has had this explosive report. Of course, he's one of the most respected journalists in all of journalism. And yet there's been pushback on this very, very precise, detailed, verified reporting that he's done on the explosion. Well, not the explosion, the blowing up of that pipeline.
Right. What I talked about was how the United States initially, and the Western press in general, they initially blamed Russia for the attacks, but they couldn't really attribute a serious motive to Russia. Later, when Seymour Hersh came out with his detailed story, they ignored it. But now the Western press has come out with another story that Ukraine actually was behind the blowing up the pipeline, and there's corroborating evidence for this and for Seymour Hersh's story. And so it's in this space where you have two different stories with various degrees of corroboration, but they're mutually exclusive. But that's sort of a distraction from the fact that both of these stories that do have mutually exclusive perpetrators, they do implicate the United States. It was either the United States blowing up the pipeline, as Seymour Hersh did, or it was Ukraine blowing up the pipeline, as other Western press have reported. But for that to be true, they would have also had to have the United States help. So what I told the Security Council was that this parlor game about whether or not it was Ukrainian or American divers who actually placed the charges on the pipeline, it doesn't matter, because it's a distinction without a difference, because in either case, the United States is complicit. And this is a serious attack. I mean, this is a terrorist attack on infrastructure belonging to Germany and Russia. If this happened to us, we'd be calling it an act of war. But since it happened to Germans and Russians, we're ignoring it. But if the reports are true, and either Ukraine or the United States was behind the attack, that's an act of war against an ally, and that should be seriously investigated.
So why hasn't Germany said more?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. The German and U.S. relationship is long, deep, and complicated. But the thrust of that relationship has been one of Germany fighting against the subordination to the United States. This Nord Stream pipeline was actually a very good example of that. There were many in Germany who wanted the pipeline to be completed because it would allow Germany to have access to cheap Russian natural gas, and that's a boon to their manufacturing industry. But there are other people in Germany who are more aligned with the United States economic system who say that it's dangerous to get so much gas from Russia because Russia is an adversary. And so these two factions within Germany have been fighting. Currently, the faction with the most deference to the United States is winning. And so there is not a lot of pushback from the German government proper to U.S. bellicosity and the evidence that points in the U.S. direction about these Nord Stream pipeline attacks. Now, there are some in Germany who are very concerned about these attacks, and they're vocal and they speak out. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere over there. The fact is that the U.S. can commit an act of terror against Germany, and many Germans will simply lie down and take it. That's pretty serious.
Well, what prompted your testimony before the United Nations? I mean, what is their interest in what's happened over there specifically in this case?
In this case, it was the Russian delegation who called for a meeting of the UN Security Council, and they picked the briefers, and they reached out to me. And they were calling this meeting to sort of jumpstart a reopening of the case in the public mind and the UN. One of the things they were calling for was a joint UN Security Council-led investigation into the attacks, in which all the countries on the Security Council would contribute to the investigation. But the U.S. rejected it. They have veto power of the Security Council, and so what the U.S. says goes. Now, there are 3 countries currently who are doing investigations about the Nord Stream pipeline: Germany, Sweden, and Denmark. The German investigation, media reports from that investigation are where you get the stories about the Ukraine might be behind the attack. The Swedish investigation, we haven't heard much other than the fact that they don't believe it was Russia. And same with the Danish investigation. We haven't heard much. So each of these three investigations are going on, but they've refused to have a joint international investigation. So these three separate investigations, with limited access from the public, are pretty much all that's going on. And so the Russians tried to get an international United Nations sanctioned investigation into this attack. But since, as I stated earlier, it's very likely that the U.S. Was behind or supportive of the attack, well, they vetoed that motion, and so the investigation doesn't happen. This has pretty significant consequences for the German economy. I mean, before the pipelines were exploded, there were reports in the Western financial press about how the German economy was at risk of deindustrialization, which is very scary. You don't want to hear an economy that's highly industrialized is at risk of deindustrialization. That means, turning them back into an agrarian farmland. But that's what the U.S. sort of wants for Germany. They don't want them to be an economic manufacturing powerhouse that could somehow challenge the dominance of the U.S. economic order. They like Germany to be subordinated, which is why I brought up the fact that the first Secretary General of NATO, Lord Hastings Ismay, he said the point of NATO was to keep the U.S. in, the Russians out, and the Germans down. And keeping the Germans down has been dramatically achieved by this attack on the pipeline. They're suffering, their energy prices are higher, but of course, since they don't have Russian gas, they get United States gas. So U.S. energy profits are higher than they've ever been. So this is a boon for the United States and their geostrategic goals.
Are you concerned that people will accuse you of having an affiliation with Russia, given the fact that they called you to testify at this hearing at the United Nations? Because oftentimes you've been accused of that. And
right.
whoever's doing the accusing, I'm not quite sure. I don't know if they're trolls. I don't know if it's. I'm never quite sure because Dr. King was called a communist. So what can I tell you?
Right, and it's part of the new Cold War that we're living in, that people will be called Russian assets if they do anything related to Russia, or if they take any position that doesn't jive with the dominant narrative of the anti-Russian consensus. But the fact is, I was allowed to say whatever I want. The Russians had no impact on what I said, and my goal here wasn't to serve Russia in any way, shape, or form. The point here was to bring information to the public in a public forum where more people could have access to this information. The facts I presented, I'm pretty sure everyone at the United Nations Security Council has a good grasp of how the West is likely responsible for the attacks on Nord Stream. The Russians knew it, the Americans knew it, the Chinese knew it, the French knew it, they all know it. So my job wasn't really to help Russia in any way. It was more to get the information to the public. And if the actual facts of the case lead to a conclusion that's favorable to Russia's position, well, I think that's a problem with the facts and not a problem with me. So if anyone wants to accuse me of these things, I mean, well, they can challenge my facts or they can, go away. I cited every single item that I mentioned in the briefing. I published my remarks along with citations on my new Substack, brycegreen.substack.com. And if anyone has any problem with what I said, they can check it there. But otherwise, I don't really have time for weak McCarthyite attacks on my character.
Dr. David Gibbs, where are we?
Yes, good morning.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today. The Secretary of State says that Ukraine has recaptured half the territory. I mean, if you listen to the corporate media, the signals are confusing. On one hand, Ukraine is holding their own. They might even be winning. And yet they need more and more and more and more of our artillery because they're having a hard time. I don't know what to believe.
Well, there's the basic fact is that right now, Ukraine has undertaken for the last month a large offensive, which the United States has mostly pushed them into doing. There was a big buildup to this offensive, both in terms of the PR aspect, a lot of advanced sort of celebratory coverage, as well as a massive amount of U.S. and European weapons, most notably Germany's Leopard 2 tanks. And the bottom line is the offensive has gone badly. But all the indications are this offensive has not been a success at all. I think there was initially hope, expectation really, of rapid advances, that the Russian forces would crumble. I don't know why people were saying that. You had General Petraeus, a retired former General Petraeus, talking about rapid advances. As far as I could tell, based on no clear evidence that was likely to happen, and it did not happen. What you've had is massive loss of life, especially by the Ukrainians, and massive loss of equipment, which may not be replaceable. One of the problems here is not only is Ukraine running out of equipment, and especially of artillery shells, but so is the U.S. and NATO. I've mentioned this before on this show, but one of the reasons, the main reason, the United States is supplying cluster munitions, very controversial because they're banned in most countries, cluster munitions to Ukraine, is because the U.S. is out of regular artillery shells. Cluster munitions aren't that effective. They can't penetrate heavy armor. And the United States is essentially running out of a lot of the equipment they need to prosecute this offensive. And so you do have the problem that, I think there was a lack of clear thinking in the United States just because, I state it simply, having studied war, I really never knew what people were thinking. And the basic rule in warfare is that offensive warfare requires a 3-to-1 advantage over the enemy. The country attacking requires 3 times more men and 3 times more equipment to succeed. Ukraine never had that. They never even came close to that. And so I don't really know why American officials, including military officials, were encouraging an offensive that very likely never really had much chance of success, just on the basic facts, except that it shows to me there's a lack of clear thinking going on in power circles in Washington and in Brussels. And I think that's very disturbing to me.
When you say a lack of clear thinking, because these are supposed to be the smartest people in the room, and they have access to nuclear weapons.
Yes, they do. They do. Well, I think one of the things to consider is that I honestly don't think the people making decisions on this are very talented. Mm-hmm. And anybody who doubts me on that should have a look at the videos of the U.S. evacuation from Kabul, which took place just before this war began. That was a disaster. And I think what you're seeing here are the people who brought us the evacuation from Kabul, the really awful evacuation from Kabul, the disastrous evacuation from Kabul. These are the people who planned the current offensive and are prosecuting this war, who brought us the war in Ukraine. I think that's what's going on here. And it's not going well. I think one of the concerns in Washington right now is the upcoming election and the fact that this war could become very unpopular in the United States and in Europe and could become an election issue. There's on the fringes, you have people like Robert Kennedy, who have been very critical of the election, and Cornel West from a different direction. They're considered fringe candidates, but they could gain much more support if this war continues to go badly and the public starts asking questions like, at a time of high inflation, inflation still is high, why are we spending $150 billion in Ukraine with no end in sight? That could become a very, very tense, it can make for a very tense election, let's put it that way.
I'd like to know why President Zelensky demands money from the United States. It's almost as if he feels entitled to it. Or am I misreading that?
No, he's definitely been berating Western officials for not giving him enough equipment, not giving him enough, tanks, artillery, and so on. The problem you have is that the United States, in its public relations effort, one of the few things they've done well here is public relations. The public relations, the propaganda aspect of this war from the standpoint of the United States has been remarkable. It's the most one-sided press coverage I've ever seen in my lifetime, much worse than the war on terror. And that shows very good public relations. Part of the public relations campaign has been to elevate Zelensky into this almost like a holy man, into this perfect human being. And once you do that, you give him a certain ability to use that advantage. And he's using it now. I think he's starting to alienate Western officials somewhat, I think, and he's overstepping his bounds. He's making too many demands too publicly. And I think that's starting to rankle. But this is a problem that was set up by Western propaganda, elevating Zelensky into something he's not.
Let me go to Ron from Michigan. Ron, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Santita and your
morning.
guests. This whole thing with Ukraine, Russia. I'm not going to go back to World War II and General Gellin, but we'll go to the Vietnam War. This, in my opinion, is the United States and the CIA in particular trying to get payback for the Russians helping the Vietnamese in their victorious defeat of U.S. imperialism in Vietnam. And I'm a Vietnam veteran, okay? And, your show, Santita, is like the only breath of intelligence or information, because after your show, it's nonstop warmongering, pro-CIA, Ukraine, NATO war, plain and simple. Everyone who is supposedly a leftist is in bed with the CIA. Going back to the Vietnam, I remember the heroin epidemic. This whole thing, is here. I remember reading a few weeks ago that the CIA was admonishing Ukraine for doing the pipeline blast. It hasn't been confirmed yet, but the CIA is admitting that they cannot control the Ukrainian and whoever else special forces are in this thing to, in my opinion, drag us into another Gulf of Tonkin, because Zelensky and Ukraine will not be happy with every weapon we have. They want our U.S. blood. They want our men and women, our Marines, soaked in blood. And Torah Torah, who'll give up their two fine legs in Ukraine today with the cluster bombs? When are we going to clean up the cluster bombs from Vietnam? They were spreading more cluster bombs. Yeah, the Russians are using cluster bombs to defend their border, or whatever how you want to call it. But this is nothing, in my opinion, but a CIA bloody, what do they call it? The Afghanization of the Soviet Union. This is the further Afghanization of the Soviet Union. Hey, and what happened with the Afghan? Didn't we do a real good job there? Worldwide jihad. Girls were going to school when the Russians took control of Afghanistan. Women were flying jet airplanes for Ukraine, for Afghanistan, and then we stick our nose in, and women cannot go to school. They cannot even walk the streets unless they're covered head to foot. It's not 20 years we were in Afghanistan. Go back to Jimmy Carter. CIA all the way. And thank you, Santita, for letting me rant. But,
No. I mean, I think you're expressing your opinion, your thoughts, and a lot of people have a lot of questions, Ron. I mean, I don't think you're alone. I mean, one of the questions that I have is that as we fight for democracy, at least that is the stated intention there. They've suspended elections, Dr. Gibbs and Bryce Green, and there's no discussion about that here. No discussion about when the Ukrainian people will be able to vote again, Dr. Gibbs.
Yes, they postponed elections, essentially canceled elections, as far as I can tell, but officially postponed them. In Ukraine, Ukraine has become a big police state at this point. Dissent is virtually forbidden on this war. It's actually not very much allowed in the United States either. I mean, Bryce Green just demonstrated the fact that you dissent on this war, you say the wrong thing, and of course, your reputation is attacked. Possibly your career is attacked. These things happen here too, but in Ukraine, it's much worse. And so the idea that we're defending democracy in Ukraine seems a little hard to accept given what's going on there. I mean, yeah, sure, Russia also is an authoritarian state. We know that, but Ukraine is certainly no better at this point. And with regard to what Ron was saying on the phone, I mean, what he's alluding to is that, the United States has a long history of predatory behavior in its foreign relations. In Vietnam and Afghanistan. And yes, I would see what's going on in Ukraine as an extension of that. I mean, yes, of course, Russia should not have invaded, but it was the U.S. that goaded Russia into invading, did it quite intentionally. And, the claims that the United States is upholding a rules-based international order, I don't see how anybody can make that claim with a straight face. I mean, the United States violates the rules whatever it wants. So this really, this war is part of a long and inglorious tradition of American predatory behavior overseas. That's how I would see it. The Nord Stream pipeline, by the way, is certainly one recent indicator of that. By far, the most likely scenario is the U.S. blew this up. The evidence all points in that direction. You'll never hear about that in the New York Times, of course.
Not at all. Let me before I pivot to you, Bryce. Let me bring on Tommy from California. Tommy, what's on your mind?
Hi, Santita.
Hey, Tommy.
I cannot believe what I'm hearing from this gentleman. I cannot believe what I'm hearing from this gentleman, and the previous one too.
Dr. Gibbs and Bryce Green
suspended their election. They've suspended their elections because don't you think Russia would target their polling places like majorly, and the people of Ukraine are not itching to get rid of this president. He's stepped up at every occasion to fight with them in the trenches, even, and he's like, I'm not looking for an exit. I'm looking for help, and we need to be there to help them. I mean, they're a democracy, and the only reason this is a war of aggression from Russia. They did nothing to deserve this. The people of Ukraine did nothing to deserve this. Their country was a beautiful country, and he went in there and blew it to smithereens. And I don't understand why this person is talking about how negative that is. No, our allies are also throwing money in there and weaponry in there too, because they know because he's not going to stop at Ukraine. He will march on to Estonia. He will march on to all the rest of these little countries that have fractured off from the Soviet Union. He wants to put the Soviet Union back together. Ukraine is just the first stop.
Tommy, we have about a minute left here. I want to give them a chance to respond to you. Will 30 seconds suffice for you, Dr. Gibbs?
All right, sure. Well, I'll say that Zelensky has not served his own people very well, in that after the Russians invaded in February 2022 and March 2022.
Tommy, let him reply to you, okay? And we'll talk to him.
There was a peace agreement that was being discussed in Istanbul, which was basically both Ukraine and Russia had agreed that Russia would withdraw, Ukraine would become neutral, would not join NATO, and Ukraine would finally agree to implement the regional autonomy of the Donbas region, the Russian-speaking Donbas region, as they already had agreed to before, and now they would implement that. Ukraine had agreed to all these things, and then under pressure from the United States and Britain, they broke that agreement and went back to war. They would have far better served their people if they had simply done that agreement and ended the war right there and saved hundreds of thousands of lives. But because of U.S. and British pressure, they gave into that pressure, and the result is a far worse war. And so, no, I don't think he served his people very well. I don't think he served them well at all.
Bryce Green, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I agree with everything Dr. Gibbs just said. Zelensky, the idea that Zelensky is serving his people by prolonging this war is just, I think it's absurd. This war is going to end in one way, with a negotiated settlement. The question is, how many more people are going to die before we get to a negotiated settlement? And the answer to that question is up to Joe Biden and President Zelensky. Nothing about this war. I mean, this war was completely preventable, right? So the idea that refusing to negotiate was good for Ukraine, I don't think that holds up to any sort of scrutiny. If the U.S. and Ukraine were able to negotiate along the peace deal that was agreed to in 2015, well, then there wouldn't be a war right now. And the fact is that, if it's only a matter of time until there is a peace deal. And preventing a peace deal from being signed is not good policy. It's just endless death. Like with this counteroffensive, they knew that Ukraine did not have enough.
Hold that. I'm going to talk to us during the break. Running over my own break. Hey, we'll be talking about the vote in a hot second, but I'm going to take your questions during this break. Stay right there on the Santita Jackson Show. I'm sorry, I wanted you to complete your thought because I wanted to get in at least one more caller before you go. Bryce?
Right. Well, I was just saying that, prolonging this war and bringing this war on the people is not a good idea. You can criticize Russia for it being a war of aggression. That's true. But to strip it of the context of NATO expansion and Zelensky and Biden's refusal to negotiate, their continued refusal to negotiate even after the war, stripping the context of that, I think, is short-sighted.
David from San Francisco. David, are we able to get him in?
Try now.
Yes, please. David?
Oh, yeah. Morning, Santita.
Good morning, sweetie. You only have a couple of minutes here, so I wanted you to get your question or comment in so they could respond before they go.
Oh, sure. Thanks. If you think about an oligarch, they're just a rich guy, and a rich guy with type A personality. And they're nothing but trouble. They're not going to get anything done right because they're ordering stuff around and they're buying stuff on the cheap. So that's what Putin's problem is. And there's got to be a corporate way to put a stop to that. We don't need guns and missiles. We just need a corporate stop to a type A oligarch.
Okay. Would you all like to respond to David from San Francisco?
Okay, I'll respond. I think that I think what you're describing here is essentially a form of economic sanctions to block corrupt economic activity that you see as sort of fueling the Putin regime. There's no doubt Russia and Ukraine actually have been among the most corrupt countries on the planet. There's no doubt about that. Both of them are. And so you're right about the general context. The problem is the United States has already imposed the most draconian sanctions in history. They were trying to crush the Russian economy, and quite openly so. What's striking is how completely those sanctions have failed and have probably done more damage in the long term to the American and especially maybe the German economy than they've done to Russia. So, I think the United States has been looking at this as if Russia is Iraq or Russia is, Libya, and they can just crush them easily through economic sanctions. It turns out Russia is a bigger country, a more powerful country, and they've been remarkably capable of withstanding the sanctions. They've done remarkably well economically. And I think the main effect of sanctions has been to encourage other countries to reorient their economies away from the United States and away from the U.S. dollar. And largely, this has been very detrimental to American power in the long term.
Just very
You don't
quickly.
cave into crooks.
I'm sorry?
Well, you don't cave into crooks. If Russia is a kleptocracy, they've always got easy money coming in because it's, their various strings, whether it's drugs or gun running or prostitution, money coming in. But a kleptocracy is not known for being smart. And if 25% of the world's topsoil is in Ukraine and they're about to pollute the crap out of it, we need to put a stop to that. And there's got to be a corporate way to put a stop to it rather than the guns.
Well, I just don't know what else the U.S. could do by way of economic sanctions. I mean, the U.S. has gone about as far as it could possibly go.
Sanctions. It's tolerating. If somebody is so stupid as to put the world's topsoil at risk, they're talking about centuries future are going to starve to death because of today. And give excuses to blowing that place to bits is a real danger. And
I agree.
We won't have history if these people do the wrong thing.
I don't think you disagree.
Well, like I said, I just have no idea. I'm sorry, what?
I don't think you disagree with that. I mean, because that's why
I don't disagree. I agree. I agree with it. Yeah.
Looking for a peace settlement to me is.
I just don't know what else.
The key.
I just don't know what else the U.S. could do beyond what it's already done to destroy the Russian economy, and to engage in what you refer to as corporate means of dealing with this. The U.S. has already done that on a massive scale.
Actually, don't look at Russia as a government. Look at Russia, instead of Russia as a government, look at Russia as just being a bunch of rich guys trying to grab a piece of the action.
But couldn't you
They're
say
not smart enough to run the sewer system.
But David,
they're not smart enough.
David, we have infrastructure. I mean, we have a kleptocracy here then by that definition. I mean, Senator Durbin in 2008. Well, no, in 2008, when when Goldman Sachs tried to collapse the system. Senator Dick Durbin, our senior senator here from Illinois, said, "Look, let's be honest. The bankers run this place." He was speaking of the government. So I think when you look at oligarchs all over the world, they are running governments. We have a corporatocracy. We don't have democracies. And I think we have to, as we look at other people, I think we have to look at ourselves first and clean up, tend to our own garden, as Tartuffe said in literature, right?
Well, you remember that old line, they'll sell the rope to hang themselves? That's what's going on over there. And when I say a corporate stop, I'm no supporter of corporations, but there's got to, even the corporations usually are smart enough to know to put a stop to a war that's going to kill everybody.
So why do you think that why do you think America discouraged the peace settlement, which Ukraine agreed to?
Well, I'm not saying it's only America.
No. I'm asking you that question. Because I mean, you're looking at Russia. I hear you, because they have not been the best actors in this. They fell for, as they say, the okie doke. But very quickly, because I've got to move on to the next segment. What about the peace settlement that was agreed upon that America and the UK said no to?
I couldn't tell you the exact details of that. I just know that
Sending Attorney Hoffler, Dwight McKee, and Keidron Franklin through.
Statements are about one piece of the whole thing.
I want you to find out. I want you to look that up, because unfortunately, our corporate media have downplayed the peace settlement that they agreed to. They were ready to sign a peace agreement, not an armistice treaty, a peace agreement.
Well, you remember when they were about to attack that nuclear power plant, and they were not going to stop the war, but they had to make an agreement not to shoot into a nuclear power plant.
Yeah, but before all of that,
you say
we were supposed to
peace
have
negotiation is different than.
No, they had negotiated a peace. This was going to be over. It was going to be over, David. It was.
I'll look for it, but what date? I mean, they're
60 seconds, everyone.
David,
what?
I'm going to have to run, but sweetie, I want you to look up the peace agreement that Turkey brokered. I want you to look up the peace agreement that African leaders have put on the table, that Russia has agreed to, that, quite frankly, that Ukraine agreed to. We're the ones who are in the way, and we're the ones who are making money. Remember, the French accused us of making money off this war, because this is happening. This is Eurasia. Europeans are tired of this because it's not safe.
Do you remember?
But David, I'm going to have to run, sweetie.
Yeah, but the statement that since Russia has invaded, the only Ukrainian position is Russia out, and there's no peace on how much.
10 seconds.
But
David,
I'm going to have to run, sweetie. But I wanted to let you go. Dr. Gibbs, Bryce Green, can't wait to have you back, because clearly people want to talk about this, and we'll do it before the week is out.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Monday, July 24th, 2023. I am so glad to be with you today as we were talking about Ukraine. If you want to hear more of that conversation, go to the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Hey, Cindy Neufeld up there in Canada. Hey, sending you so much love. Donnie D. And is it Miss Max? Show me how to pronounce your name. Is it Tashay? Max, I want to make sure that I'm getting your name, the pronunciation of your name correctly. And I want to hear what your thoughts are. You all can continue to call us and give us your thoughts about Ukraine and just how we're going to get out of there. But right now we're talking about, as you look at democracy and the way they choose to govern themselves over there and work that out, we're looking at democracy in the United States of America. As of 2022, 48 out of the 50 states did not allow felons who'd served their time, who'd paid their debt to society, to come back into the voting system. Now Tennessee has made it virtually impossible. Even if a Tennessee resident, as has happened, a Tennessee resident they were okay to vote by another judge in another state. The state of Tennessee said no. So what does that mean? This is 4.6 million Americans, everybody. We saw what happened in Florida, one of the most populous states in the United States. The majority of Floridians said once you've served your debt to society, you should be able to vote again. Then the Republican legislature, who are in the minority in Florida, said no. So what's going on? What gives? Let's talk about this. We are in the election cycle of 2024. Who will be able to vote? Who is counting the vote? All of those things matter. So I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. Michael, I hope you're still there because this is for you. 773-763-9278. Hope to see you at Rainbow Push on Saturday at 10 o'clock at 930 East 50th Street. Got a lot of great things cooking as we are moving into a new phase with the new president, Reverend Dr. Freddie Haynes. Oh, don't worry, Reverend Jackson will still be there. But we do have a new president at the helm. Let's get to it, everybody. Some of these headlines. It was a chaotic weekend of protest, according to this Washington Post report, in Israel. Israel's far-right government wants to limit the power of the Supreme Court. Parliament is voting on the controversial plans today. 29 weeks, the people of Israel have been protesting. Tens of thousands of citizens have filled the streets. Some are spending their sixth consecutive night outdoors as Prime Minister Netanyahu was rushed to the hospital for an emergency cardiac procedure. He was released this morning, praying for his health. Donald Trump's classified documents trial was scheduled for May. A federal judge set the date on Friday. She rejected arguments by the former president's attorneys that the trial in Florida should be held after the 2024 election. He's the early front runner for the 2024 Republican nomination. By May, he could go to trial in the classified documents case as the presumptive nominee. That'll be interesting. There's no clear winner that has emerged in Spain's highly charged elections. A new national monument will honor Emmett Till. The plans are as follows. Emmett Till and his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, their national monument will include sites in Chicago and Mississippi. The White House is expected to announce the monument's establishment tomorrow. The 1955 murder, of course, of this 14-year-old child helped spark the modern-day civil rights movement. Indeed, his mother led that by courageously opening his casket after the state of Mississippi would not allow her to bring her child home. They would not allow her to see her child. After some negotiation with Dr. T.R.M. Howard, one of our most prominent physicians of the last century, and the NAACP, and of course, Medgar Evers. She was able to get the body home after promising the state of Mississippi that she would not open the casket. Of course, she famously opened the casket, changing history. Twitter is rebranding to X. Twitter's owner, Elon Musk, announced the rebrand this weekend. He suggested replacing the Bluebird logo with an X, which started showing up on the site overnight. A new morning after pill can prevent sexually transmitted infections. Everybody in Chicago, we're going to have a high of 82 degrees. It will be clear. 89 degrees will be the high in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Major League Baseball, the Twins 5, the White Sox 4, the Cubs 7, the Cardinals 2. In Major League Soccer, well, our women's team, the United States, they won over Vietnam, and they will be facing off against the Netherlands on Wednesday. But today, you're going to see Brazil and Panama, Colombia and South Korea, Germany and Morocco. We will see what's going to happen. Yesterday, the Swedes were triumphant over South Africa 2-1, and the Netherlands were triumphant over Portugal 1-0, and France and Jamaica were tied at 0. In the WNBA, the Sky 90, the Storm 75, the Aces 98, the Lynx 81. Let's talk about the vote, everybody. What about the vote? 48 states are now have banned people as of 2022 with felony convictions from voting. And that's 4.6 million people. And now the state of Tennessee has they just cut off just about any route for anyone who has a felony conviction, who has served their time, to be able to vote. I want to know what your thoughts are. Call me at 773-763-9278. Devin, can we bring up Michael? Is he still there?
Yes.
Michael, what's on your mind,
Here.
sweetie? Thank you for being so patient and holding.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about ranked choice voting.
Of course.
I think we should all encourage more people to vote. Now, ranked choice voting is the modern, sophisticated, and intelligent way to vote. In traditional old-fashioned voting, you only get one little vote, even though 6 or 7 or 8 people are running in that district. In a primary, a general election, you only get one vote. But ranked choice voting gives you 5 good votes. 5 votes. Mm-hmm. So you have a better chance to influence the whole election.
Now, it also solved the problem of the spoiler, of the fact that, in that election that Al Gore lost because Ralph Nader took away 1 or 2% of the votes, and that let the Republican candidate win for presidency. But we're going to have that same problem on this election, and Biden has these third-party people running against him, and they might peel off 1 or 2% of the vote and let the Republicans win in that state. But ranked choice voting, the way it goes, you could use your first vote as a protest vote, or for a third-party candidate, or a protest vote, or even for your own ethnic or religious candidate. That's your first vote, protest. But your second and third vote, you come around for a more moderate candidate who has more broader appeal. You could do both. You got 5 votes to work with. It's a real good deal.
Well, Michael,
And
let me ask you
ranking,
this. Is it democratic to only allow 2 parties? Now, mind you, these parties are not from the people. They're private corporations, right? And,
that's true.
They're private corporations, so they set their own rules. They decide essentially who's going to be the president for us. And they have a general person's agreement amongst them not to let anyone else debate. Is that democratic to you?
Yeah, the 2 parties they get a little bit conservative on both of them, but the Democratic Party is more liberal. The Republican Party is going crazy.
I'm not asking you a relative question. I'm asking you an absolute one. I'm asking you about the democracy itself, right? And I'm only asking you this because I don't see people who announce that they're running for president as spoilers. I don't see the 5 or 6 other people running for president on the Republican side. I don't see them as spoilers. I don't see Cornel West, Robert Kennedy, or Marianne Williamson as spoilers. I see them as people running for president. I see them as people who can't get on the stage for me to hear them, which I think is anti-democratic. And I think of Benjamin Franklin being asked, once it was established that we were going to be independent from Britain, they asked him what for a woman it is famous, it's part of lore, and actually is part of history. She said, "What kind of government have you given us, sir?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it."
Yeah, if you can keep it.
If you can keep it.
Well, the third-party people have a right to run, and ranked choice voting gives them a better break because they'll have a good protest vote with the first vote. But I think the individual voter should have a choice to do a protest vote to vote for a third party if he believes in that, and then come on a second and his third and fourth vote for another candidate who might be a little more moderate. And that way he's playing both sides of it, and both sides are part of his personality. He would say, if Cornel West can't win, if he can't win and he only gets 1 or 2% of the vote, I'm still going to go with Biden for my second place choice.
Well, I mean, I'm hearing you about ranked choice.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can I ask a question?
Dwight? Okay, well, first of all, let me introduce the panel. We've got attorney C.K. Hoffler, former president of the National Bar Association. We're so glad that you are with us today, attorney C.K. Hoffler. And we have got, who else do I have here? I have Dwight McKee.
Dwight McKee and Keedron Franklin.
And we have Keedron Franklin, who is one of the nation's leading young organizers. He made it very, very, very clear that he is an organizer, not simply an activist. He organizes people. And he has a personal narrative to go with people who have needed to be able to be put back in the system. Dwight McKee?
Yeah, I want to ask a caller a question. If I like the cheerleader and the quarterback likes the cheerleader and we all going to the prom, should I not ask her to go to the prom because I know the quarterback wants her to go to the prom with him? Am I a spoiler if I ask her to go to the prom? Or does he have an inherent right, because he's the quarterback, to take her to the prom because he's on the football team but I'm not? I mean, the whole notion of a spoiler is absurd. Is everybody has the right to run for public office and let the winner win and the loser lose. But I'm not taking any votes away from you just because you have no inherent rights to the votes anyway. So am I a spoiler because I asked her to go to the prom knowing that the quarterback wants her to go to the prom? That's my question for the caller.
No, not a spoiler. No, everyone has a right to run for office, or a third party, or in a Democrat or Republican. Everyone has a right to run. That's true. But I just want the individual voter to have a choice. He could vote for third party or independent, and then he can come around and vote for a second and third and fourth. And he might believe in it. He might believe it for a second vote to vote for Biden or a more moderate candidate or a more traditional candidate. He should have that choice with 5 votes. With only 1 vote, you only have 1 vote to deal with.
But don't call me a spoiler because I exercise my right to run. That assumes that these two parties have the legitimate right to all of the votes, and everybody else is out of sync for doing that.
Because you're actually affirming the right for people to run by having ranked choice voting. You're saying that everybody ought to be able to run. We just need to rank them so that we can, so that you can. So that your votes can count if this person does not win. Ranked choice voting, I'm still wrapping my arms around it. But what is your final comment?
Let me say this. Ranked choice voting has been successfully used in San Francisco, Oakland, Minneapolis, St. Paul. And in the November election last year, it was implemented in Portland, voted for it, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, in Illinois, and New York City has it now. New York City, and they had an election for city council, aldermen. They had more independents, more women, more ethnic minorities win on the ranked choice voting than ever in New York City. So it's working very successfully. Illinois, Evanston, Illinois has implemented ranked choice. They voted for it. It went through in November, but they have to wait for their city elections, which will be in 4 years from now.
Okay,
now, these big cities.
Well, no, but let me arc this back to what we were what we really want to talk about too, because I hear you about. We can have another conversation about ranked choice voting. What about the 4.6 million Americans who have been convicted of felonies, who served their time, who would like to vote again? In fact, in Florida, more than 1.4 million of these voters were going to be put back on the rolls, save for a Republican legislature, which is in the minority in terms of raw votes, who said no. They overturned the will of the people. What do you make of that? I mean, now Tennessee is saying absolutely you cannot vote. There is, I think we have a real problem. Your thoughts?
I think felons should have the right to vote. They should have a right to vote once they pay their debt to society and go out of prison. They definitely should have a right to that. I hope Illinois has it. I think Illinois is pretty liberal on that. But Florida is doing a bad job. That governor in Florida is a bad person. He's very reactionary. And the state legislature in Florida is very reactionary. But I believe ex-felons should have a right to vote. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, sweetie. Well, I'm loving you, but we're trying to get this started. But you started the conversation beautifully. And you know what? I will reach out to David Daly and some others, and we'll have a conversation about ranked voting, okay? Because we've had that before here.
Right. Okay, thank you. And I think it's the wave of the future. But people will learn how to vote properly, decide, and they'll get more people to come out to vote. In the mayor election we had recently, only 35% or 38% of the people came out to vote. Because they figure, well, 1 vote can't do much when 9 people are running. If you had 5 votes, you could influence those 9 people better by voting with 5 votes.
I got you. You've had your say about ranked choice. We got it. And I want you to come back when we have a real full body conversation about it. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sweetie. Tennessee Supreme Court on Thursday ruled against a man who sought to register to vote in Tennessee after receiving clemency for a crime committed decades ago in Virginia. Now, Tennessee is one of the majority of states which will not allow convicted felons who have served their time to come back and vote. And they have now just had a vote, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, which will make it even more difficult. It'll make it virtually impossible. I mean, you see this man receive clemency in Virginia, but the Supreme Court of Tennessee said, no, you can't vote. What is going on? This is 4.6 million people around the country. That's a lot of folks. That's 2% of the voting population.
Well, Santita, what's going on is this is part of a methodical plan that's being perfectly executed by conservative forces. In Florida, and we have to talk about Florida because Florida has a lot of history on this. And Florida, the people voted, it was on the ballot, that formerly incarcerated people, that's what I like to call them, formerly incarcerated people, once they served their time and paid their debt to society, should have the right to vote. That's what the people decided. But a very conservative Republican-led legislature said, yeah, whatever. But they can vote, but they have to pay what amounted to a poll tax. So they had to pay whatever fees, administrative fees, and all that court fees. And the clincher was they couldn't determine for an individual. They really couldn't determine what they owed. So it was very unspecific, unspecified, designed to delay to get through the election cycle, and it was successful in that. Fortunately, there were many groups, including Rainbow Push, that became very, very active in finding out, and they had to go person to person for the formerly incarcerated person to person, and find out and work on how much they owed. And then there were monies that were raised because people felt this was inherently unfair to pay off those fines. Because in Florida, we were talking about 1.6 million people. And that would have made a difference in the election. This is when Andrew Gillum was running for governor. So this is all tied to elections. It's not like a policy is coming up that people thought about. It's always tied to elections. And we're facing right now, of course, presidential elections. We're in the election cycle. So it's unfortunate. It's terrible. It's voter suppression in my mind. And based on my analysis, without a question, I don't think we have to, and this is such a bad, well, I can even use the expression. It is what it is. It's voter suppression, and that's what it is. We don't need to sugarcoat it and say, oh, well, no, there's an analysis that has, it's voter suppression. Because I bet dollars to donuts, that if we look at how these formerly incarcerated individuals, what political party they belong to, that dollars to donuts, that they're Democrats. This is all by design.
Well, I would say, because I got to run. Hold on, I got to go to this break. When you all hear my voice, okay. I got to go to break. I mean, Democrats and people who would be independent Democrats, people who might be third party, people who might not be right wingers, people who might just be seeking independence. They want to vote, and they're not being allowed to. And you see this gentleman who got clemency in Virginia for a crime committed decades ago. The Tennessee Supreme Court said, no, you can't vote. Now, I don't care what they said. Wow. Let's talk about it on the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Remember, at the founding of the Republic, only property white men could vote. Are we still there? Back with more on the Santita Jackson Show. All right, keep talking, CK, because we're on everybody. We're on YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show. So please go to YouTube, everybody. Go to YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show. But you were saying, CK?
Yeah, I mean, it's voter suppression. I mean, we don't have to even dress this up. It's voter suppression. It's designed to accomplish goals. It's designed to just disenfranchise people who are already disenfranchised, right? Mm-hmm. And prevent them from voting. Period. End of discussion. And they are going to accomplish that in this cycle in Tennessee. I predict that this issue will be escalated up to the U.S. Supreme Court, one way or another.
Why?
I am not persuaded. Why? Because this is an issue that's in controversy. It's an issue that touches on, this involves state rights because it's the state of Tennessee. But this guy, clemency, he was allowed to vote. The crime happened in Virginia. So there's some interstate issues. I think this case or similar cases or other cases will ultimately escalate up to the U.S. Supreme Court. I cannot say that I'm confident that this U.S. Supreme Court, as it is configured, will reach a what I think would be a progressive and the right decision to eliminate the voter suppression that this is creating. I'm just not persuaded that this Supreme Court will do that. I'm persuaded that 3 justices on this Supreme Court will do that, but I'm not persuaded that when the vote is in, and there'll be the dissenting opinion. And so therein lies the difficulty.
Sending Reverend Yuri through.
These agendas, they know that. They figure they've got a 70% chance that their position in Tennessee will be upheld. So they're like, yeah, well, do what you got to do. And in the meantime, by the time, if it ever does escalate up or whatever, the elections will have taken place. So that's what's happening by design. Part of we have to. For those of us that are more liberal and progressive, we have to recognize what these things are. Recognize when the other side has executed a well-oiled machine plan. This is part of a plan, and they've been very effective, very successful, I will say. It's much to my chagrin. Voter suppression is the bane of our existence, but this plan has worked to a T.
Reverend Dr. Yuri, glad to have you here. And
good morning. How are you?
Doing great. But Keidron Franklin, this is a young man who we need to wrap our arms around. He is an organizer, Dwight, a young man after your own heart. He corrected me when he was on my show before. He said, "No, I'm something other than an activist. I'm an organizer." And I appreciate it. And there is a difference. There is a difference. Because good morning. And of course, his group is Black Men Build. But CK and Dwight, and particularly Reverend Yuri, he's got a food truck. I told him he needs to bring it up to Chicago. He keeps threatening.
Oh, real soon.
Yeah.
Real soon.
That's right.
60 seconds.
Wait a minute. If you say up to Chicago, does that mean he's in the South, like in Atlanta, Georgia, something like that?
Memphis.
Yeah, I'm in Memphis.
Oh, he's in Memphis.
Yes.
Oh, well, I guess on the way to Chicago, he can stop in Atlanta. I'm not sure. Geography's never been my strong suit, but I don't know.
Well,
it's between Memphis and Chicago is Atlanta. I don't know. I just don't know.
Oh, honey, I just heard good food, and I went, what? Oh. Hold on 1 second. Stand by. We're coming in.
10 seconds.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Question before you today. Should you be allowed to vote once you have paid your debt to society as a felon? Well, the Constitution actually says no. Well, it actually says no, you lose your right to vote. It says you lose your right to vote once you become a felon. So let's talk about this today. Tennessee has actually locked it in. They will not let you vote once you've paid your debt to society. And the Supreme Court on Thursday ruled against a man who sought to register to vote after he received clemency in another state. Ernest Falls was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in '86. He moved to Tennessee in 2018, and then Governor Ralph Northam granted him clemency, restoring his full rights of citizenship. Restoring his full rights of citizenship, which is the vote, everybody. But when he tried to register to vote in Tennessee, he was prevented from doing so. So that's 4.6 million people all around the country, everybody, 2% of the voting population, according to data. And so I want to know what your thoughts are with respect to this. Dwight McKee. Your thoughts?
Yes. Well, I think that
if you don't have the right to vote, you should also not have the obligation to pay taxes. That the whole basis of the Constitution is based on representation, taxation without representation, and that if you don't have the right to vote, it violates your right as a citizen, and only citizens have to be obligated to pay taxes. And so I think that those should be coupled. And also the felons who are in jail should also not have the obligation or the commitment to put out these forest fires. Because they make us poor citizens when it's time to put our lives on the line to put out these forest fires. People don't know that much of when these communities be on fire, most people don't know that the people that they bring out to put those fires out are people from jail or for formerly incarcerated people, and they promise them, some reduction in their sentence. And so if they reduce your sentence, but you still can't vote, why are you putting your life on the line? And I also think that when jurors look at people on trial, particularly people of color on trial, that they need to consider that in their deliberation, because many of these charges are set up to create the pretext to be able to take them out of the system so they don't have the right to vote. Because those states know that once you're convicted of a crime, you lose your citizenship rights and you really legitimately reduce back to slavery. And so I think that people should consider that those jurors who are minorities, that's also at risk when they convict people of these crimes. And a lot of these people really are not guilty. They just use the pretext to take out of the system. So it should start with anybody who can't vote does not have the obligation to pay taxes.
Reverend Dr. Yeary.
Well, good morning, Santita, and to my colleagues. I agree with Dwight's sentiment. The problem is that's not how either the Constitution or the statute is read. If we go back and remember, the 3/5 compromise uses the word persons, 3/5 of a person, for the purposes of determining what does your elected representation look like in terms of who's in the Congress. So personhood, you benefit the government. Citizenship is a benefit to you, right? It allows us to leverage. And this distinction that comes out of the 13th Amendment and the state constitutional amendments that now mirror it is particularly problematic, because the 13th Amendment says that slavery in the United States shall be outlawed except in instances for punishment for crime wherein a person has been duly convicted. But it doesn't say which crime. It doesn't say what types of crime. It just gives a blanket. And so it leaves this arbitrary brush to use to just kind of take folks out of the political process. That's where I agree with Dwight that there has to be some legislation that allows for the restitution of those rights once one's debt is paid. Conceivably, if I lose my liberty, i.e. citizenship, I lose my freedom, and then I pay my price, then I should then get my freedom, my full liberty back, which includes the right to participate in the political process. That's not the practice, and it's by design, right? Because remember, the whole point of the prison industrial complex was to create a new type of slavery. The whole point of convict leasing was to be able to get free labor without necessarily violating the abolishment of the slave system. And so what this has been is an effort to kind of keep the effects of slavery in place without leaving the original appearance of slavery in place. And we've got to be real clear that our effort, those of us who have the uninhibited right to vote, we cannot sit back and just let the politicians impose on a whim these disqualifiers without holding them accountable. So when we look at who's not voting that can vote, when you don't vote, it allows then the state to be arbitrary in who they disqualify from voting so that they can continue to keep the system of oppression in place. And so it's one of those things. Everybody ought to be civically engaged because they should be outraged that these are the kinds of things. It is very similar to Dred Scott. Dred Scott's free in one state, goes back to another state, finds out that he can't fully participate and does not have access to the court. You get exonerated or you get clemency in one state, you move to another state, and now you're told that, no, you really aren't free. You're still a slave here, and so there's really nothing we can do for you. Dred Scott still lingers. It's just called something different in the courts.
Keedron Franklin, brilliant young organizer from Memphis, entrepreneur, father, family man, and indeed, Black Men Move is your group. But this impacts you directly. I mean, as you're registering people to vote, as you're organizing people to get involved in the community and to improve the community and to watch the police and to really make our lives better by making our community safer. How does this impact you?
Yes. Good morning, and good morning to my colleagues.
Good morning.
It impacts me directly, right? Because I am a felon. No, let me take this back. I'm not a felon. That assignment was given to me by the state. I don't take on their assignments, right? So, yeah, I have been assigned a felon. Actually, I have a Class E felony for possession of marijuana. And so, again, just to think about things that led up to a person like me, right? Smart, intelligent, outgoing,
So
hard
possession
worker.
of marijuana, I just want to get this straight. Possession of marijuana, which they sell out west without penalty. So people are getting wealthy, right? You're a felon because you possessed it, right?
Most definitely. Actually, 5 minutes across the bridge, is actually legal in Arkansas, right? 3 minutes across the state line in Mississippi is actually legal, but right here in Memphis and in Tennessee, I will go through the ringer of the judicial system and charged and sent to court and held in jail and tried for something that's legally grown all over the world, or naturally grown all over the world, right? And so yeah, I I was assigned that in 2019, right? And so one day I was having a dialogue on Facebook. People was talking about voting. I was like, man, I can't vote because I'm a felon. I can't vote because I owe too much on fines, right? As a felon. And there was a sister. Her family are like prominent organizers, the Lee sisters from Memphis. Her mom runs like our slave haven. So she's a prominent attorney here. She's like, nah, Keith, you done it right. Let me talk to you, right? Let me talk to you about this. I can get your rights restored, your voting rights restored. And so that's when I started learning about, dang, when they stripped me, they stripped every right I had as a citizen, right? That means I had to go, and now I have to go one by one and try to retrieve all of these rights back, and starting with, like, again, the voting restoration. And so we talked, and what come up was exactly what everyone is saying. It's voter suppression, it's disenfranchised laws that they put in place to keep people like me locked out of not just locked out of being free, right? But I'm locked out of employment, right? Certain places I can't apply for a job if I'm a felon. There's certain places they won't let me live if I'm a felon, right? If that's on my background. So there's a lot of things people get stripped out of once that's assigned to them, right? And so when I went through the process, and this is just a little game, right? I filed indigent, which means I'm poor, right? Which is a process where the state can recognize if I'm poor, I can't afford to pay these extensive fines that y'all hit me with to satisfy the courts. And so there's a process where you have to fill out the indigent form. The attorney sets a court date, and you go back before the judge or in the courtroom that the case was in, right? The judge gets to decide if he, she, they are going to grant you your voter rights. But there's almost like a little trial, right, where the state is in there. And now the state prosecutors, they can't say yay or nay, but they will be in the courtroom trying to badger
or at least make it look, trying to get this money, right? Because they don't want people to file indigent. Again, it's a part of the state. They want the fines and fees and for you to please the court. And so after this process, right, I go in. The judge asks me a certain amount of questions. Hey, can you, are you poor? Can you do this? Can you pay that? And, no, I can't. The prosecutor battled a little bit. The judge still granted it. Now, let me tell you, although the judge said yes, there's a process. I then go to the election commission, take some paperwork over there, refile for my voter rights, send that up to Nashville. Nashville has 2 weeks where they're supposed to, at least in 2 weeks, turn around and call you and say yay or nay. Nashville called me in about a week and denied me. And let me tell you why they denied me. It wasn't based off of fact. It was just based off what this woman thought she knew. So she's like, no, Mr. Franklin, I'm just calling to let you know you was denied. I'm like, okay, what's the purpose? She's like, well, it shows that you only served 1 day on a felony weed case. And I was like, that's true. And so for her, she didn't think that was possible. And so I had to explain to her what happened during this, right? Again, this is a whole other conversation we could talk about how a lot of us go into these spaces where, I judge that, hey, I may need to just make a plea, right? And I plead out for a Class E felony weed charge, right? Because again, at that time, 2018, I was under scrutiny from, being followed by the police. I was on the blacklist. The feds was at me. So I'm like, man, let me just get this out the way. I don't want to go sit down for a long time, right? But if I wish I'd have thought that because, again, I didn't realize how much harder it'll be to regain all these different citizen or my inalienable rights back, right? And so once she called and talked to someone, she called back and said, okay, cool, you clear, you're granted, you got your voting rights back. And so then they, went through the process again. I received my voting rights back, right? But then that's when it hit me, is how many people are locked out of the economics behind this, right? And I started creating what you call social entrepreneurships because I was a felon. And not only did the felonious assignment, right, that they had given me locked me out of economics because I was blacklisted by being an organizer, right? So I was locked out of getting contracts to organize around unions because the mayor and the people running the union were buddy, and so they didn't want to make the mayor mad, right? So it made me start thinking about how many other people who don't have the social capital that I have are being locked out and they don't have the help, right? And so, it's criminal. And so I started doing work to, figure out how do we restore as many people from that being felon, right? So that they can start back having stake in their communities, right? Finding some valuable or viable employment. And again, just not being looked at as this third-class citizen or as a denizen, right? Someone who don't have rights, someone who don't have, they're stateless, right? They don't have this agreement by the government and them to say, hey, yeah, we got all the rights and we're gonna, you got privilege to them, right? And so yeah, we're fighting that even to today. Again, we're coming up on our mayoral elections coming up, and I'm going through the process of restoring rights. And
even though the state has made it harder. I mean, the state is they've made it virtually impossible. Are you all planning to sue?
I'm sure like the ACLU has something because that's usually who jump in because that's usually who jumps in and sue on behalf of. Really, you got to think about it. Shelby County is probably the bluest part of Tennessee, right, and the blackest part of Tennessee, and so a lot of this impacts Shelby County and the residents of Shelby County.
Dwight, what are your thoughts, given your movement background? What do you see?
Well, I think they should file suits, of course. I think they should protest, of course. But I think that ultimately what they should do is organize as many voters as they can to vote these state legislators out of office. And the vote that they're trying to suppress, that even with the voters that they suppress, still probably 40 to 50% of the populace who can vote don't vote. And if you just organize them, get them involved, and have them vote at the local levels, then you can take these state legislators out and redesign the legislation in such a way as you can then bring the felons or the convicts or those who've been incarcerated back into the system. And the irony of it is many of the citizens, black or white, already believes that should happen. This is a small body of right-wing Republicans mostly who are trying to maintain power and maintain themselves as a minority in power. And so it's a real achievable goal if they were to turn it into a voter registration drive, register people to vote, and have them vote against these state legislators.
So
these
you're saying
tyrannical state legislators.
they need to organize the people who can vote and the people who do
That's
support
correct.
them, the people who already have that power, who've not been stripped of that
That's
power,
correct.
shall I say.
That's correct.
Reverend Dr. Yeary, your thoughts? Because, I mean, you see it's possessing marijuana is legal 5 minutes this way, and that way, but not where he was. And you're making money off of marijuana all over the country. And what do you make of this?
Well, 2 words: by design, right? The truth of the matter is what was punitive in one generation is profitable in the next. Maryland just recently approved recreational cannabis. They've had it for a couple of weeks since July 1, making so much money that goes not only in the transaction but in the state coffers that it offends the sensibilities that we have devastated whole community with this very specious and punitive war on drugs. And we're continuing to see the lingering effects of it. The truth of the matter is that when we look at voter turnout, and Santita, you and I have this, I think it's our ongoing drum. We get so enamored by federal elections that we forget state and local impact. This notion in civics called majority rule is a little bit off. It's the majority of who participates rules. So if the majority of the minority is determining who's going to set the laws, then you really have the real majority sitting back and watching. Average voter turnout in local and state elections is far lower than presidential elections. It's a statistical fact. If voter turnout in local and state elections is about 30% of registered, not eligible, registered voters, not to count those who are unregistered and should be registered, basically what you're saying is 50% plus 1 of 30% gets to determine how laws are made, how the budget is passed, what issues get addressed, whose needs get resolved. That's the reason why voting is so critically important, especially when nobody's paying attention to what's going on in the local and state level. That's how you end up with these supermajorities, with these very punitive laws that come out that say we're going to stigmatize an entire group of people on one hand, and on the other hand, we're going to try to figure out how to compete with the local cat who's selling his weed, trying to pay his bills. Well, we don't want to compete with him anymore, so let's go ahead and put him out of business, create another government monopoly that is going to make a whole lot of money, but we're not going to repair the damage of the entire group. That not only did we penalize them for what we say was bad behavior, we're also going to penalize the communities that they're from, because now they're going to be economically devastated. No jobs, no opportunity. Rev says all the time, jobs out, opportunity out, drugs in, policing in. That's a formula for disaster. And those of us who are registered to vote got to vote. Those who aren't registered to vote and should be registered got to register and you got to vote. Otherwise, we're going to keep hearing this story over and over and over again. And these states are doing it, recognizing that our problem is not a power problem, it's a math problem. We're not showing up in numbers. To Dwight's point, to be able to change the outcomes of these elections. And that's what the Carter report says is the definition of black power.
CK, before I pivot to you, I want to give these last 2 minutes to Keidron Franklin. You've just heard Reverend Dr. Uri, you've heard Attorney CK Franklin, if Hoffler, you've heard Dwight McKee, who has 60 years of movement experience, who said you need to go after these people who are registered to vote, who can vote these people out of office. How does that sound as a strategy? Does that make sense as a strategy to you, for you?
Oh, yes. Those two brothers dropped the jewels, right? It's almost like both and. So something I was thinking about is both and, right? The restoration and the registration. But with registration, actually getting people who can vote, who are used to voting, to vote in favor of a felon, right? Or someone who's a signed felon, right? Which means thinking about, again, those lawmakers, those legislators, councilmen, your mayoral candidates, like the people who directly impact us, right? But more so on the state, like getting people to vote in favor of making sure that the people who are in office or in play are supporting those who are locked out, right? Those who are, and I know in our local elections, and you're super right, it's like somewhere between 25-30%. The most people who vote, and that's if all 30% voting is about almost 100,000 people, right, out of 650,000 people in our city. You know what I'm saying? So they're on point. The jewels are there to organize, agitate, and again, just figure out how to move those numbers and concert with, again, the people who are locked out of economics. So yeah, it's a both and for me, the restoration and registration, and again, just trying to build out what is that organizing. So there's something that's going on here, right? Where
I got 30 seconds.
Gotcha. Well, we are looking to go around to the different parts of our area where the apathetic vote is high, right? Those, and that's the 70%, that are locked out. And so we are running campaigns to register and restore. We're using the street orgs, right? We're using the guys who you may not look at as, oh, you're voting, right? So we're using the ones who do get it, right? and are willing to be that organizing force. So I truly appreciate the affirmations of what both brothers said, because again, there's those jewels that we need.
Stay right there, everybody. Stay right. No, Dwight, I've got to get out, but stay right here, everybody. We're still on YouTube, and more of you are joining us. So stay right here, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. You've been listening to Keidron Franklin and his struggle to get his vote back. Come on, he's done everything. Possession of marijuana makes you a felon? Are you serious right now? When 5 minutes over this way, 5 minutes to the north, east, south, and west, you're not a felon. Unbelievable. I can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show, but stay right here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Sending you much love, everybody. Have a beautiful day. Stay right here with us. We're not done yet. Dwight McKee, you were saying?
Yeah, I was going to say, and for the young brother, your precedent should be the Civil War. Is the South has restored their citizenship rights based on an oath, even though they were under sedition, which is far worse than a marijuana crime. And what Johnson did for them was restore their citizenship rights. And all they had to do was take an oath to the United States, and they would be good citizens. And by 1870, they were fully restored as voters and as part of the legislative process of the United States. So if they could be restored based on an oath.
Okay, somebody, I can hear something in the background. Okay.
That's not me. If they could be restored their full citizenship rights after sedition and the murder of Northern soldiers based on an oath, then certainly that's a precedent for us having registration based on some felony, which is far less than sedition and murder.
Most do. Ooh-wee. You drop one on me there. I'm going to go get it. Yeah. I appreciate that one.
So that makes sense to you, Dwight. I've
A
got to
lot.
connect you and Mr. Franklin, um, because Dwight McKee is one of the founders of Operation Push. He's with Reverend Sharpton, the National Action Network. He's a dean of students at the Mafa Redemption Project. And then, of course, you've got Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary. He's part of the national leadership team at Rainbow Push. He's the senior pastor of the Douglas Memorial Community Church in Baltimore. And of course, I wanted to bring, before she goes, Attorney C.K. Hoffler. She's the former past president of the National Bar Association, which is the largest and oldest Black bar association on earth. It's more than 65,000 lawyers. C.K. Hoffler, are you still there? I wish you were. I'm going to, we need to write up your case. I mean, because it's Reverend Yeary, just for all around him, possession of marijuana doesn't make you a felon, but right where he was in the nexus, right in the sweet spot, his whole community, everybody around them can possess marijuana, but everybody within their community, if you possess it, you're a felon and you can't vote. That's what it comes down to me. What's next, Reverend Yeary?
Well, Tennessee is not an exception, it's more the rule. If you start looking at southern states where they have started moving to legalization of marijuana, you will find that there are some states that resist the move in that direction to repair the stain of what the past war on drugs has done. It's the new thing to be in vogue, right? When we see progress made in some areas, you see some states that are just going to remain in the ice age, come what may. It doesn't even matter what you say. We have to look at this and then recognize that when we map out what the political response is going to be, and this is to Dwight's earlier point, there have to be conversations and discussions, meetings and plans, strategies developed to identify which seats you're going to go take. We've got to not only vote, we have to run candidates, we have to be able to fund campaigns, and we cannot just sit back and make elections about personality. We've become sidetracked by the foolishness at the top to think it's about who do I like. No, elections are about policy, not personality. And so it's a what process. It's not a who process. What's on the agenda and who's going to advance the agenda that's going to restore the full participation and economic interests of our community. If we don't do that, then what we've done is we've consented to the abuse and the oppression that's imposed on us by law.
Dwight McKee, what's next for Kedron?
Well, that's what I was saying. The gumption of a state like Mississippi, who left the Union, who declared war on the Republic, who sent soldiers to kill troops in the United States Army, who killed slaves, who were found to be not supporting the Confederacy during the war. How dare they pass judgment on somebody for smoking a joint? And by 1870, they were fully restored to the Union. And they had congressmen back in office in Washington after all they had done. And Lincoln had promised them that all they had to do was to say the pledge allegiance. That's all they had to. They didn't have to pay money. They didn't have to go to jail. All they had to do was pledge allegiance to the U.S. government, and they would be fully restored as citizens. The audacity of them, of that crowd, Mississippi, Alabama, that Confederate crowd, the audacity of them to say you can't vote because you smoked a joint and we all have the right to vote, even though we declared war on the republic, is mind-boggling to me.
Where does that come
And
from,
so,
Dwight? That thinking.
hubris, arrogance, white privilege. You know, it comes from this being a country where white people are forgiven and exonerated and brought back into full participation, and the contempt for black people to say, well, you know, y'all were never really citizens in the first place. Like you said, the Dred Scott decision that y'all never had rights we should respect. And it was always built around the notion of privileged white men having all the power and all the voting. That's where it comes from. Just white hubris, white privilege, and a denial of history. I mean, when you think about it, that these guys left the Union, declared war on the country, killed 500,000 soldiers, or 500,000 soldiers died in the process. And their citizenship rights was restored under another Tennessean.
Wait, Dwight. And
Johnson.
Then a sympathizer killed the president.
Kill the president. Unbelievable.
I'm just following you, Dwight. That's all. I'm just saying, you and Reverend Dr. Yeary. I'm just trying to keep up with you. That's all. Like,
Yeah. And it's today, Monday. I wish it was Sunday so I could pass that collection plate. I'm talking about, look, you just the audacity for real.
Oh my gosh. Well, you know, I want you to remain encouraged, but I also want you to know what's next, Dwight, which is why, you know, we have to have a retreat, because you've got this young man who's come out of this situation organizing people, even though he doesn't have the right to vote.
And then they want to fight for the right to put statues up of these seditionists, you know, and to turn them into heroes, and the daughters of the Confederacy, to turn them into heroes, and to make some virtue out of their sedition. These guys are incredibly arrogant when you think about it. And they still live off the benefits of the people they enslaved 200 years later. They still own the land from the natives that they take the land from. You know, they still have to live off the prerogatives of the labor, the money they stole from us. No, we have to fight these guys on every hand and understand really what we're dealing with.
Do you think we understand what we're dealing with?
I think we don't really think it through. I don't think we think it out in the terms that we have in this conversation. Then is that somehow we believe that these guys have the right to make these decisions because now they're in the state legislative. Now they've been legitimized. They've been self-legitimized. You know, these guys, to me, they still operate in the spirit of that sedition in that era. I think Texas still sees themselves as a republic unto themselves, the Lone Star State. I think they still see themselves that way, that that the United States imposes upon them, or they try to impose federal laws upon them. And every 10 years or so, they threaten to leave the Union. And yet they have a voice about other folk who are loyalists. Come on, y'all.
Yeah. Reverend Dr. Todd Yeary? Huh?
Well, again, this is by design. This is not an accident. It's intentional. When all we need to do is go back to, I think it was 1994, the midterm of President Clinton's first term, and you had the Republicans announcing their contract with America. It was really a contract on America, where they began to dismantle the political wherewithal, starting at the local and state levels, and then just went all the way through to just restructure the way government works so that you could have state independence to create pernicious laws, but you also had judicial cover by hijacking the federal courts. And then in between, you have this obstruction that makes it harder for folks who have the right to vote to be able to vote, and those who should have the right to vote can't get their rights restored. And so this is not something that just happened overnight. This has been part of the plan. This is the design that is the next phase of the fight, just as Reverend Jackson often talks about the third Reconstruction. There's also this move, to Big Brother Dwight's point, this threat that somehow or other we're going to leave the Union. The one thing that keeps some of these states from leaving the Union is that they have U.S. military bases in their states that would immediately get pulled out, and they would have a problem. So they're dependent on the very government that they keep threatening, but the threat is really a ploy to be able to reinforce this stratification, who can and who can't, that allows them to maintain Southern order without any kind of enforcement mechanism. So when we look at the history of it, this is still the pushback. The Civil War, right? The other thing the Southern states had to do to rejoin the Union is to make sure that they ratified 13, 14, 15 amendments. They didn't like that anyway. They keep coming back at that with all that they can. Due process that applies to the states, they have hated that since that clause came up, and you're starting to see them use it against those interests because they're trying to take us back in time to an order of racial hierarchy that doesn't even benefit most white people. And so the trick is keep poor whites ignorant of what the game really is economically, use them as the ploy to keep the stratification and the order of racial hierarchy in place so that at the top, the 1% controlling more and more of the resource, they're never held accountable. It's a simple math question. If we take 1% of the population versus the 99% of the rest of the population, and if there were to be a conflict, who you going to put your money on? Well, typically the numbers would say you go with the greater number. But when the resources are controlled by the few, now you have a different order. It is all by design, and the design has not changed. And in America, the design is not going to change unless the people make up in their mind that they're going to change it.
Amen. We're the ones with the power. So what's the way forward for you, Keitron?
I mean, like, quite natural, right? I continue doing the work, continue organizing. Again, just for me, right? The market of guys and people that I come from, right? The process, the political process, is not favorable, right? So a lot of people have chosen not to. And then that part about the 1%, you have those that again, they don't want to participate in it because they don't see the value in it, right? And so, yeah, I just have to do my work and continue in highlighting like a lot of the atrocities and how, day-to-day politics and our day-to-day lives are intermingled. So again, I'm just continuing doing the work, registering, restoring, organizing, agitating, and eventually, like I said, I have a friend. He just pulled his petition last week to run for our city council, District 6. And so, again, I'm encouraging my friends to run. Let's take these seats. Let's put regular people in there. I don't want to put a professional politician in there. I want to put someone who knows the struggle, who knows Ms. Ann and know how hard it is for her to get food out, because she lives in the food desert, and he want to create avenues to support that, right? He want to put more bus lanes and terminals around. So, again, I'm continuing doing the work and helping build our people.
How about finding Dwight McKee? Dwight McKee, you recommended that he do what? Register whom?
Those who are already unregistered, those who are eligible, or who's registered who are not voting, and run your case to them. And I think what you create with new information is a new insult level. Is that when many of these people think about it, when they think about the audaciousness of some of these politicians, who have asked to be forgiven from all of their sins, be not held accountability for all of the things they did to this nation, and they understand how they are also being duped and deceived and played. I think you will help create, a momentum on your side, because it's what Brother Uri said. When they understand that this 1% controls even their lives to their disadvantage, that they send these to these unjust wars for their own personal benefit, their children to these wars for their own benefit, and understand how they are being played. I think that, that kind of truth would help set everybody free.
Okay. Yeah, most definitely. Most definitely. I'm taking on it. Trust me, I'm adhering to that.
Well, I would like to connect you, Reverend Dr. Uri and Dwight McKee, to Mr. Franklin, because I think that he's open to your advice and counsel, and he needs it. Because we got 4
Well, I'm
points.
from Memphis, Franklin.
That's right.
Yeah, Franklin,
Say
I'm
it
from
again.
Memphis, so I know what you're dealing with, huh?
Oh, okay.
I'm from Dixie Home. I'm from Dixie Home.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You know exactly what's going on.
Well, I am really, really, really glad. I'm glad that you all were able to talk today. And it's 4.6 million Americans, everybody. 4.6 million. What, Vivian, you said, I think everyone in jail for nonviolent marijuana charges need to be released, need all their rights restored. I hear you. I mean, and if you can imagine, and thank you, Arlene, for always helping people. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here to do. And this young man, as you can hear, possession of marijuana, particularly when you go to white areas, and marijuana is now they make money off of it. It's okay. When you come to a black area, you got to go to prison and become unpaid or underpaid labor. It's slavery.
Santita, think about it this way. Once upon a time, they tried to arrest Pookie. Now the government has just put Pookie out of business because they realized that there was a money flow that they had not yet tapped into. At the end of the day, at the core of the United States is to make whatever money it can by whatever method it can make it without any sense of obligation or duty to principles of justice and morality. They don't care. It's in the design. And the states are following that same lead. And so on one hand, we'll make profit off of you and put the opportunity out of business. So first we said what you were doing is wrong. Then we said what you were selling had some medical benefits. So we came out with medical marijuana. It's not all that bad. And then when we found out that worked out with some prescriptions without a whole lot of testing on whether or not marijuana was good for you. So now you're saying that the state turned into a dispensary and that what the guys were selling on the corner really wasn't harmful, it was helpful. But because they were running a pharmacy without a license, you jammed them up. And now you're saying we don't even need the pharmacy anymore to regulate it. We can still have medical marijuana and recreational marijuana, and all you got to do is come in with your credit card, your cash. You can buy it as long as you don't buy too much of it. You can have your edibles. You can have your gummies. You can have your plant. You can roll it, smoke it, do whatever you want to. And at the end of the day, the communities that you have devastated still look like war zones, and there's not been any restitution of the harm that's been done to them.
None.
And even that's selective, because even today Willie Nelson will smoke a joint in the voting booth. Even today Willie Nelson will smoke a joint in the courtroom.
Oh, what do they say? Willie Nelson gets high to get normal. Bless his heart. That's one of my father's biggest supporters. Bless his heart, baby.
What I can appreciate is we have a new district attorney in Memphis, and he has publicly put out there marijuana is very low. It's de-emphasized to him, right? Like he really don't want nobody to bring anyone in there that's weed. And so that I can truly appreciate when you have people that start getting in office and they realize, like, okay, the state is eating off these people in a way, and they, and so I can truly appreciate our new district attorney that has that mindset.
But with that DA, here's the thing you got to be careful with, because this is where the voters have to give him cover. If the powers that be feel like the change in attitude by the prosecutor does not benefit them, they then target those prosecutors. We've seen it across the country with progressive prosecutors, black prosecutors for the most part, who have just taken on unrelenting fire from the other side because they have tried to change the way prosecutions have gone against the interests of black and brown and poor communities across the country. So it's not just to get them elected. You got to keep them protected so that they can continue to do what they need to do. Otherwise, you'll see the state house come after some random rule that says, if we don't like what you're doing, we can remove you, even though the people elected you.
Man, thank you. For sure.
Well, we need to assist him and the 4.6 million others to whom this is happening, because this is unbelievable. But I tell you what, a lot of people are appalled by what they're hearing about your story, Keedron Franklin. They're just appalled by it. And Dwight and Reverend Dr. Urey, it needs to be an issue. Because this is, like you said, it's a plan. It's a plan, which is why I'm glad I reached out to you last night, because I said, he's got to be on here. And
you did perfect, right? Because you didn't know about the felonious, assignments. So like, wow, this.
No, I did not. But I just promised you that I would really work to bring you into conversations, because I think that you do such fantastic work. But now that I see this, there's some other work that we've got to do with you. And so, that to me is the key. That to me is the key. We have got to, there's something we've got to do for you and with you. And then since you have the spirit to pay it forward, that's what we have to, we have to do that too. There's too many people. You are, like you said, you shouldn't have to carry the yoke of being a felon. I mean, what is that? Yeah. All these unconvicted felons walking around.
That's the scarlet letter of today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That is. They can have it if I don't take it on.
I'm glad.
I don't take it on.
I'm glad. I mean, and taking your vote denies you your citizenship. I'll never forget being at court with my brother Jesse and just how devastated he was when the judge said, by entering your plea, you do know, Congressman Jackson, that you now have lost your right to vote. And he turned around to my parents and he said, Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry. Oh, my heart just cracked into dust.
Man.
I said, because this is what these people wanted to. This is what they wanted to do, and they did not want. They didn't want any money. They wanted no restitution. They just wanted Jesse to go to jail. That's all, and they wanted him out of Congress. That was it. I mean, all this stuff is political.
And much of that comes when the prosecutor decides to charge and to plea out. Mm-hmm. Is that the difference between a Hunter Biden plea and a Jesse Jr.'s plea is that they gave Hunter the option to plead without it being a felony. That when they set up misdemeanor or however they set those charges up, then when you plea out, then you don't have the stain of a felony. Whereas the poor and the darker plaintiff guys, they don't give them that option. Mm-mm. They tie in felony as part of their conviction. So even when they plea out, they have that stain upon them, and they carry that cross around their necks. because the prosecutors know exactly what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And the white guys get to plea out with particularly on the white collar crimes, with non-admissions of guilt or no contest. However they do that, the young black guys is you'll get 60 years, or you can have 6 years with a felony charged against on the same plea, the same charges.
Let me do you one better, Dwight. Going back to Congressman Jackson. Congressman Aaron Schock from Illinois was indicted on 24 counts. And the agreement was that the government would drop the charges if he agreed to pay back the IRS. And he was accused of unlawful spending from his campaign account, wire fraud, and numerous other charges. But the deal was, we'll look the other way and let you move on with your life and not prosecute you if you just agree to pay the money back.
No, wait a minute.
Those
Put
are
a
the
pin
kinds
in
of
that.
deals that they cut off.
They wouldn't let Jesse pay the money back. And those moose heads that they were talking about, he still possesses.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, you want me to go to prison? Because see, what they do then is on the same day, at the same time, the feds, they subpoena your friends, which means you have no more friends. Because when you get subpoenaed, you get a $25,000, $50,000 bill because you got to get you a big lawyer immediately. You said, no, I'm going to stop that. They were like, well, no, you don't have to. You can, no. We're going to end this now. And his lawyers were the best friends of the people who run the Justice Department. So you tell me. And they were telling him he was going to spend the rest of his natural life in jail and he should do the right thing. Because what an embarrassment you've been to your family. The right thing is taking yourself out. I'm so glad we intervened. Like, no.
You was explaining the Shaw case.
It was the same. It happened at the same time, Dwight.
I know. I want you to explain that.
Well, to the notion of prosecutorial discretion, the prosecutor gets to determine what are the terms that they will accept to keep from taking you to trial and imposing a big number on you. And so it can be as arbitrary as the prosecutor wants. They like one defendant versus another defendant. It is literally that simple. So you can have similar facts and circumstances, and you see it in courthouses across the country every single day. One guy comes in charged with possession with intent to distribute. They get released on their own recognizance pending trial. Another person from a poor neighborhood with a different background, accused of the same thing. The perception of dangerousness shifts, and then they're held without bond because there's a belief that there is a potential harm to public safety. It is that the prosecutors, and this goes back to my brother's point, that they have elected a district attorney who brings a different understanding and approach to the enforcement mechanism. We have to pay attention to those elections, but also make sure we protect them while they're in office. Because when you start changing the dynamics of a prosecutor's ability, that's why they went after Marilyn Mosby. That's why they went after Kim Gardner. That's why they targeted Kim Foxx in Chicago. This thing over and over and over again, that we take prosecutorial discretion as a given when it's a white prosecutor. But when it's a progressive prosecutor or a black prosecutor changing the dynamic of how black and brown defendants are treated inside the system, now all of a sudden we have a problem that requires state intervention to be able to undo the outcome of the election. That's the new trend, because remember, the game is to keep the new system of slavery, the prison industrial complex, flowing. The plantation model is gone, but the prison model is alive and well.
Mm-hmm. So your takeaway today, Dwight, well, Reverend Dr. Uri, then you, Dwight, and then we're out of here. Reverend Dr. Uri?
Well,
I did this, Keegan. I just want to say thank you.
Oh,
Thank you for having
Keedron.
me
Oh,
on.
I'm glad you're still there. So what is your takeaway from today, Keedron?
Oh, a lot of jewels. One again, digging into, like I said, organizing those people that are already registered and pushing my campaign to them around supporting just people who are locked out, right? And then and getting them to see different. What's up, Daddy? Good morning. Okay, Dave, hold on. And again, just those jewels, right? Just thinking about that oath from the civil rights, right? How the South or people who had rebelled against the state was able to restore themselves just based off an oath, right? So just ways to explore all these precedents that was already set. And so, there's a lot of jewels. There's a lot of jewels, and I just want to appreciate you.
Reverend Dr. Yuri?
Keep up the fight. I mean, the truth of the matter is organizing is always from the what we call ground zero, the point that's closest to the conditions of the people, and it expands and flows out from there. If all politics is local, then you and I must continue to make sure that our local interests are advanced. The city council race, that seat that you're going for, go for it with all you got. I would look at who is in that space, particularly churches in that district, and begin to start reaching out to them. You got to support a campaign. Campaigns cost money. They are not free. And so we got to make sure that we get messages out, a ground game to get folks to turn out, get folks registered, and start reclaiming the territory of policy interest that allows you to get what you need. Keep doing what you're doing, and we'll be here to make sure you get the support that you need.
Absolutely. I connected with him through Joseph Kyles, Reverend Yuri, and Dwight McKee. So he's been doing work with him.
Dwayne, my guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these are our people. So we've got to work with them. Dwight McKee, your closing thought?
Well, first I want to applaud you, young man, for picking up a fight that is a generational fight, and for you to having that kind of courage and that kind of conviction to not just fight for yourself, but to fight for other guys in your situation. We have to replicate that throughout your generation and the generations to come. Secondly, I want to thank Yuri for his insight. He's just has a profound legal mind, and always brings such profundity to these conversations. And thirdly, I want to say that these people who have made the most profitable living in the history of the world off the backs of us and our ancestors are determined to maintain it by any means necessary. They're determined to not give up their privilege, whatever it takes. And that they are no longer the majority, but they understand the system well enough to know that if they can neutralize the majority and control the minority, that they can maintain their power. And so that's what we up against, and that's what we have to use against them. The fact that when all is said and done in this country, the majority rules, and they're no longer the majority. And if we organize the majority, we can run them out of office. And some of them will run the risk of themselves becoming arrested, because what they're doing is violating our constitutional rights to citizenship, and that's illegal. And so keep fighting, good fight, and we'll be there to support you at every level.
Most definitely. Sister Jackson, Brother Yuri, Brother McKee, I wholeheartedly appreciate you all, and most definitely, I will reach out to Sister Jackson to get y'all contact so we can anything I need.
All right, and the only thing I require from you is when you bring your food truck is I want first dibs. That's the only thing I require from you.
Put no sugar in it. He can't have any sugar.
Oh, really?
Okay.
I got you. I just
I know you
actually
can come
got
up
a
with
second.
something fabulous that'll be
Yep,
healthful
yep.
and tasty for him. Yeah, I just jumped
Oh,
in it,
yeah.
Dwight.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you,
Well, I have a pizza and pasta truck that'll be opening up soon. So yeah, we have some good healthy options for you.
All right.
Honey, child, please, he wants something fried.
Define good and define good. And
Oh, well, we do fried turkey ribs now. Nobody does fried turkey ribs in the city of Memphis.
Now you're talking. That sounds good and healthy to me, right there.
That's what I'm talking about. With the barbecue sauce.
Fried turkey ribs.
With
That
the
sounds.
barbecue sauce. That's what I'm talking about.
Fried turkey ribs. You just look up a truck called the Check-In. Look us up and you'll see, man. We one of the premier trucks in the city. One of the top trucks in the city.
You need to come to Chicago.
Do our thing.
Soon.
You need to hurry up and come
I
to
need to
Chicago.
bring it for about a week.
I'm
I need to
call.
bring it for
Yeah,
about
they
a
do
week.
Amazon. All right. And they do Amazon,
Oh please, I'm gonna call Jan, Dwight. Get off this phone.
All right, y'all.
Thank you. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you, Santita, for putting us all together.
I'm gonna call Jan right now, Dwight. Now I'm mad with you, and I'm gonna call my mother and tell her what you're trying to eat. Oh my word! Sending you all so much love, everybody. God bless you. Love you, love you, love you. Have a great one. Thank you, Devin, for a great show. God bless my morning stars, Cindy Neufeld from up there in Canada. Thank you for joining us, girl. Lorraine at work, joining us. Hey. Hope your mom's doing well today. I'm about to go check on my dad. So, all right. My love to you, Cindy. God bless you. And everybody, like and share the show. Please like and share the show and tell your friends about it. Sending you much love. Bye-bye.